Well, I moved north and I experienced my first snow in about 20 years.
Dude,
so here we go.
We had snow Monday night too. It's November 16th, 2022. We might be a day late, but we will not be a dollar short. Welcome aboard, everybody. You're listening to the Crushing Iron podcast, and this is episode 634.
Yeah, we got that nailed down.
Yeah, we got that nailed down in our previous meeting. We were a little bit late. This is as I was kind of texting you this morning and having a little bit of fun with this. This is Michael Jordan had his famous flu game in the finals, and this is my flu cast. The Bruce household has been laid out the last few days. Luckily, I'm the only one standing currently, so I snuck away today for a little bit to knock out this podcast for you because, listen, streaks are important. And so is our 2-day-a-week podcast. It's important. So we'll make time for that and make time for you. If it's your first time tuning in, welcome. We appreciate your time. You have quite a lot of options. The Triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. Your time is very valuable, so we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also a lot of race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life, not just as human beings, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. We also talk a lot about what our own athletes are going through. Mike and I both work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner-level triathletes looking at their very first 5K or sprint, all the way up through elite-level amateurs trying to get back to Kona, and everyone in between and from all over the world. And we'll use the feedback loop we have with them in training peaks, emails, text messages, and the like to drive the discussion of the day. We also utilize our Facebook group quite often. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group. Answer one simple question and let's right in. Amazing community and really a valuable resource in a sport that can be really confusing and overwhelming. You get a lot of people in there who have been around the block quite a few times and made basically all the mistakes you can make in the sport. And so ask questions, don't lurk, but participate. And again, we'll go in there about once a month and do a little bit of a Q&A and answer as many questions as we can on the cast. But that's it. We don't do sponsors. We don't do ads, but we do have one agenda, and that's to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
And that might be what this cast is about.
It is.
I knew you're going to make a comeback. Well, I got the text yesterday and can we delay it? And there's always I don't know about you, but we've got the streak going 2 a week for like 800 years, I feel like. And it's like, you never want to lose the streak.
No.
And I was like, well, for a brief minute there, I thought maybe this might be my Wally Pipp moment where I was going to have, Pip is out and Gehrig's going to have to fill in. And I thought, man, am I going to have to do a whole cast by myself? Like a full bro science, suboptimal bro podcast.
You could have done it live from the Boca del Vista lobby too. I mean, honestly, it'd probably be our most listened to podcast ever if you did that.
Yeah, it could be. They've got a huge spread of like winter food trinkets out there now. I think some local craft stores in there selling their wares. I mean, it is a 40-foot table set up, and there's nothing but nuts and like frosted moth I don't even know what like chocolate covered peanuts, all that sort of thing. But while we're on the Boca, I just want to get one quick thing out with Del Boca Vista. Man, I've talked about it before, but the swimsuit extractor is like the most popular corner in the locker room.
For sure. That's where conversations happen. It's like the water cooler at the office.
Every single time I get out of the pool, and I'm like, well, maybe because I don't always do it, but a lot of times I'll get my swimsuit. Every time there's somebody there, and the dude, then I'm like, all right, well, I'll just take off some stuff and get ready. And then I go back, he's still hanging there. I don't know what goes on over there, but Ken, I'm like, I'm the only one in the pool. So I'm like, well, why does this even happen? But then I remember they've got the jacuzzi,
sauna, steam room,
jacuzzi, the steam room, and they also have a warm pool that I always forget about.
They can't think of anything more disgusting than a warm pool. I mean, like
dude, it's packed.
It's like going back to what you said about the spread. Like there's 3 things I've never understood about gyms, and places like Boca del Vista. One, when they've got spreads, it's always things that are like desserts and cakes and whatever. 2, people will circle the parking lot like 5 billion times trying to find the front row spot when they're pulling up to a gym to go fit, like get in shape in. They're like, I get the front row spot. They're like, why can't you just park where North people do? You need to walk like an extra 50 steps. And number 3, news. All they do is have news on the TV. I'm like, don't we go to the gym to like get away from that? But it is every single gym has like, it's like MSNBC, CNBC, CNN, Fox News. It's like, who the hell wants to watch any of this and actually make themselves feel good? That's one of my top 3 things that I can't stand about gyms.
Yeah, I always shut mine off on the treadmill, and I agree with you. But yeah, it's phenomenal, man. The things that go on there. So, but
like you said in the intro, our topic for today, happy and healthy, mostly the healthy. And then, but also, it's, we got Thanksgiving next week, and it's all about, being grateful. But, in the last, 2 to 3 weeks, we've had a lot of conversation. The podcast has been really driven towards setting yourself up for success next year, right? And setting boundaries and your want and your why, and like, seizing the moment and making time for yourself and getting things done. And those are hugely important. But I think one of the other things that kind of keeps us going in a world of I think comparison and expectations and always wanting to do better, which is again the kind of the theme we had for last week, and that we mentioned, is that as coaches, it's a hard job because your athletes are never done. They're never satisfied. They always want to get faster. Is to not forget where you're from, and to always remember and always be grateful about how you started. And I was going to kind of go this way anyway, just because this is always an interesting week for me. I'll be 9 years sober on Sunday, and I kind of do a weird thing where I will I'll go back and, like, if you go on Netflix, you can search intervention, and then basically they have like this show called Intervention where these families do this intervention with people. They do kind of a whole, like, it's like a docuseries, I guess, where they chronicle like their journey. It could be drugs and, or alcohol, whatever it is. And then at the end, they do this intervention with the family and they go off to treatment. And then sometimes they succeed and sometimes they don't. It's really hard to watch. I think it's important for people to watch in general if you're not familiar with addiction in general and as a disease. But I cry every time just because I've been there. But I do it because, and as I was kind of telling you before we went live today, is I do it because I always think it's important, because I didn't need to watch it my first 2 or 3 years out, because it was all very, very real. Everything, I was still living a lot of the hardships on a day-to-day basis, and things were difficult. But now I'm so far removed from so much of it, and, almost 9 years down the road, is that I kind of forget how hard things were. And I also forget how far I've come. And I also forget how bad things were. And it's always really good for me because I end up watching, these episodes, and at the end, either someone succeeds and you like, I start like tearing up, whatever, because you're so, it's like, oh, another one, successful. And then the other time it's like, so-and-so, left treatment after 3 days and, whatever. And it's a failure. But it's just a great reminder, for me specifically, about how far I've come, how grateful I should be, and then not kind of just, not take things as important as they should be later on in life. And I think I mentioned this maybe last year or 2 years before, around the same time. I used to not think it was a huge deal to go in and get my chip. I mean, you were there when I got one of my chips back in Nashville. And then my sponsor a few years ago said, you don't, after a few years, you don't go get your chip for you. You get it for the people who were in there for their first 24 hours, because you want to show them what's possible, right? So picking up your 9-year chip, your 10-year chip, whatever it is. I remember being in there the very first time, picking my 24-hour chip. I'd been sober for 24 hours, which felt like a lifetime. And I think this dude picked up like a 16-year chip, and I was like mind blown. I was like, what? No way. How is this even possible? Like this isn't real life, And I remember, like, as the more I went to, it's like, that's what you see, because, and again, I mentioned this before on the cast, is like the loudest ovation you get in the room when they give out chips from 24 hours all the way up to, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years is for the person that gets their 24-hour chip, because it's such a huge deal. And so, again, like we were talking before the cast started, I just think it's important to always go back and remember how far you've come in your triathlon journey. You know, the first time, how nervous you are to go out for your first run, how nervous you were to get on your bike for the first time, right? You probably been bike since you were like 9 years old, or to get in a pool and you had no idea what to do. I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday. Like I remember getting in the pool. Man, this is forever ago. I don't even remember when, but I remember being so nervous because I was really overweight. I had these navy blue cargo swim trunks on, and I could barely make it a 50, and I was dead. I mean, I was absolutely dead. This is like 2002, I think. I was toast. But that was the first time I got in the water. I mean, I remember it like it was like, remember it so vivid. I mean, the first race I ever did was on a felt S22 on the beach bum triathlon in Hilton Head Island when I lived there in 2003 or 4, and then got this like coconut trophy for ever being on the podium. Like I remember all those things like it was like very, very vividly. And I just think, again, like as triathletes are very performance oriented. They're very much, I want to get better. And we all do. But it's also super important to not forget where we came from, right? You know, why we get into the sport, and to be grateful. I think not just for ourselves, right? Because, you know, it keeps us in the sport. You know, an attitude of gratitude is something that we preach with our athletes a lot, but also helps us be stewards of the sport, right? You see, you know, triathletes get a bad name a lot of time because they can act like elitists and they're type A and they're selfish, but, you know, we all came from somewhere and now we're here. Right. And we've all had our own journey. Most people didn't get in the sport, you know, as this like already happy, healthy person, or they, you know, they would probably just be doing what they were doing before. Mm-hmm. They get into it because they needed something to get them healthier and to get them happier. And that's what this sport has done for us. And so, again, I think it's just a great time of year. And honestly, probably should do it more often, right? Than the end of the year to have an attitude of gratitude. It shouldn't be Thanksgiving. It shouldn't be, you know, 9-year sobriety dates. It should be just grateful, right? That we can be healthy and I'll shut up in a second. But like I was saying before we got on the cast is, you know, I track my resting heart rate and stuff like, you know, the past over a year. And this morning it was like sky high because I've been sick. And for me, it was like 12 beats over my normal, which is significant. And then I looked at it and I still thought that's still like 3 beats below the low end of what's average for the population. And I was like, that's something to be grateful for, right? Because even at my unhealthiest or sickest, I'm still in like the better part of the ballpark for the, you know, the sedentary population that is the lazy United States of America.
Yeah, well, I mean, you said that whole thing about grateful. I think I've always felt like there's some really great parallels between recovery and just triathlon, and it's sort of that one day at a time thing. You know, just be grateful today that you can get on your bike or go for a run or swim or whatever. And I was making some notes this morning about the concept of training, and you know, when we're training, you know, when you train somebody to do something, a job or whatever, it takes a long time. Like you're doing little things in little increments and you're not at the end already. You know what I mean? So training becomes a step-by-step process, and you have to just sort of take it in little increments, and that's the best way to learn it and build a good foundation. I was telling you too beforehand that yesterday, I have this little office space now in Beloit, and it's a really cool place, and it's one of the many sort of awesome facilities that has been created in this town by a woman who runs and owns ABC Supply, and she's allegedly one of the top 10 wealthiest women in America in our little town, and she does some amazing things and builds cool restaurants and boutique hotels here in town, and just everything they do is just phenomenal, and it from all the way to the decor to just how everything's handled and the branding. And so yesterday their branding manager was speaking at a lunch thing down there, and I go in there, and the girl that runs it's like, hey, you should join us for the thing. I go, I don't know, you know, these things like aren't for me. But she goes, there's free lunch, and I said I'm in. And so I sat there, and what happened was interesting because he sort of asked us, there wasn't that many people, maybe like 10 to 15 that were participating, and he asked us to kind of write out our branding words and things like that. And you know, it was just funny because you were talking about reflecting today. So I was yesterday reflecting on where we've come from as C26 triathlon and what that means. And it was kind of interesting to look back, and I said, hey, our thing from the get-go has been happy and healthy. And then the next step of the process was, create a list of your do's and don'ts that meet that brand or match up with what you guys are trying to do. And I wrote down, for the do's, I wrote be fun, inspire, create environment to meet friends, be inclusive, embrace positive, live our own journey. And then for the don'ts, I put don't be negative, don't let people be alone in their journey, and don't be a total dick, that kind of. But I just think it's so interesting because I do feel like that's a huge piece of our puzzle, and we've really tried to stick to that. And I think we've been pretty solid on it all the way through. And when you talk about, because it is about people coming in here and getting into triathlon and wanting to do something good for themselves and change their lives. And like you, I totally remember. I can't remember if you were there the first time I tried swimming, but it was the East Nashville pool. And I went 25 and I got to the other end, and it was like, everyone down there was like, dude, relax. Like,
if I was there and had seen that, I probably would not have taken you on as an athlete.
Yeah, for sure.
It was already a huge risk.
I mean,
I would have said no.
Yeah, but to think back on that, and literally, my couch to 5K program, and couldn't swim 25 without just being completely gassed. And I had a biking background, so that came a little easier. But for the most part, I was at a crossroads, man. I think, you remember. And I was working in, speaking of news, I was working in the news business, absolutely drowning my sorrows nightly, practically, and just stuffing a lot of feelings. Right. And I just remember I started a blog when I started working with you, and it was called Crushing Iron. And one of the first things I remember, like really innately, was that it felt like I was breaking up rocks that were just kind of like, wedged together inside of me. And I was just so tense and uptight about everything, and everything wasn't going that well. So yeah, man, it's interesting to look back at where you came from and just appreciate where you are. Yeah. Just being able to get on the trainer this morning for like 45 minutes and actually go after, I mean, that kind of stuff just for most people out there is not happening. And it's just, it'll knock them down for, who knows how long. So yeah, I'm glad that you're feeling better. And, I also think it's just really important to reflect on and remember how you feel when you're sick, and like how grateful you should be when you're not, just like, cause it really can mess with your head. It's like, you feel like nothing makes sense, and it's easy to get down on yourself, and I'm doing all the wrong things or whatever the case may be. But yeah, just to kind of, and I also think sometimes that's one of the reasons we get sick, is just a little subtle reminder. It's like, hey, live your life, live it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, because you never know when. It's all about choices, right? Because I had like this big week. I was like ready to rock this week, and mapped out my plan. Then it was like, life's got different things. But I love what you said about the going back on the the branding and the podcast, and it's funny because like two of the, I would say, the most significant and most important things that I have in my life came from nothing. Like you think about, or came from various, no expectations, no, very day to day, like the podcast, we just kind of like set out to just see what happened, and then kind of came from that, no real expectation, but just gonna have fun, do it for good, and then see what happens, from a conversation at a coffee shop, and having send me a link about what kind of headset to order on Amazon, and basically explain to me what a podcast was, because I never listened to one in my entire life. And then sobriety, it's like, it feels like forever ago, but it wasn't, I walked out of in 90 days, I walked out of there with like two backpacks worth of clothes, and that was it.
Yeah.
That was all I had. It is all I had. I had lost my car. I had been evicted from my apartment. I had nothing, zero, negative dollars. I had to borrow money from my parents for the first week of cash at this halfway house. And I was in there with 17 other guys. I had a roommate. He was like, he had to have been like close to 60. Anyway, what drove me out of that place was the fact that he ate freaking like Funyuns and pork rinds at 2:00 in the mornings. I couldn't sleep. But anyway, topic for a different day. But it's like when you think about where I'm sitting right now, and doing what we're doing is, you have, if you want to continue to go forward, you have to challenge yourself. You have to, do things that, aren't comfortable, that are kind of like a healthy fear. But you kind of have to have that with that same level of appreciation, because what happens then again is like you forget, and I think we talked about this last podcast, was you forget what you're capable of. Right. And how courageous you had to be to get into the sport, or to show up to your first sprint triathlon where you knew nobody and you had no idea what to do. Right. And now you're doing a couple Ironmans a year, and now you're destroyed when you don't take 5 minutes off of time, or 30 minutes, or, you have a bad day, and it wrecks you for the rest of the season, and everything you do has like negative connotations around it. We always need to go back. Right. And it's always trade that when athletes are like, yeah, I just thought I'd be faster today. I'm like, remember when you used to like walk like 14, 15 minute miles? Like now you're down like the 9s and 10s. Like, remember that. And then also remember how you got here and got there. Right. Small, manageable, successes every day. That's it. That really is it. Like there's, and again, like when there's so much talk these days about, shortcuts and hacks, right? How to get somewhere quicker, how to do things, easier, quote unquote, easier. And I think the journey and the process is so underrated that and people forget that it is the most valuable piece, right? It's the journey to get you to where you're going, the journey to the destination. That's the most meaningful piece. It's like, that's the best piece of it. Right. And that's the part you're never going to forget. But the hardest part of it wasn't the end. The hardest part was getting started. Right. Was signing up for your first Ironman, scared shitless because you had no idea if you're going to finish, or half people even know what they're going to do, right, or how to do it, or how to train for it. Some people don't even have a bike. It's like they're just absolutely I remember there used to be this race series called Tri 101. This is like 2003 or 4 or 5. There was one in Bradenton, Florida. They used to be all kind of, not all over. There was maybe 4 or 5 in the U.S. It's like a 1.8 mile swim, an 80-mile bike, and like a 16 or 18K mile run, something like that, whatever. Add up to 101 miles. And I was saving up for a bike. I didn't have one. And I would I was working in the Cheesecake Factory, just been back from Hilton Head. My parents were getting divorced, all these things going on in my life. I remember I would wake up and go straight to I had to either go swim and run, or I'd get up and I'd start at the 5:15 a.m. spin class, and would do, I ended up doing 4 back-to-back spin classes to get myself ready for when I did get a bike that I'd be able to, pedal it the way I needed to do well on race day. Mm-hmm. Like I did that for months and months and months. I remember the spin instructor, her name was Lisa. She was like, "You're back again, huh?" I was like, "Hey, stand for the next one." Like, "Yep." I went through bottles and bottles of Accelerate and like Endurox, which is like this old school carb mix they used to use. And that's also when I had been in the oatmeal sandwich. I think I mentioned that on a podcast before. I was like, that was invented because I would eat it on the way in because I needed so much breakfast. I was about to work out. I'd swim and do that. I'd work out for like 3 hours in the morning, Monday through Friday, and then I'd wait tables all day. That's how into it I was. But that's also how, like, now people get frustrated and quit a bike workout when their smart trainer doesn't work. Yeah. Right. Or it's not calibrated. It's like, so I always think it's funny. Like, so when I go back in time to visit my mom and go to the Green Hills Y, I always kind of go up here to that room and I always remember, like going back and looking at those sessions, like, man, like I thought I knew so much back then. Right. But I was also so novice, but I just appreciated and loved how healthy I was getting. And it's a weird sport to be in. Right. And a weird time, I think, when everyone wants to be better and enjoy a journey and a process so much, yet we try to shortcut it. Right? It's like, we've the term road trip is now like going up to the corner store. That's how short people want to make a road trip now. That it's not like doing something memorable, because a road trip is like the most fun thing when you go with your friends and take a road trip. No one gives a shit where you're going. It's just you and your buddies in a car, listening to music, windows down, rolling to the gas station, grabbing bags of chips and Cokes and driving until the sun comes up the next day, and then you're there. Like, that's what you remember. And again, like in triathlon, when we take things so seriously and we compare ourselves, we have these expectations, and we listen, if you're racing and you're training and you're consistently letting yourself down, then your perspective and your view is skewed, and it's not sustainable, right? You've got to be able to look back and again, the setting of expectations is what makes things seem so impossible, right? Like going back to what I said about the first night where I went to, it was a backroom meeting. It was a Wednesday night at 7:00. I remember it like it was yesterday. I went in there, and also remember looking around and thinking, like, I don't want to end up like all these people in here that are miserable, but I'm here and I've made it 24 hours, and this guy picked up his chip. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that seems impossible. And I know that if I had left that, I think I mentioned this in one of the weekly emails for the team a few weeks ago. It was like, if I'd have thought of that, like how impossible that is, then I would have quit. I've been done.
Yeah.
I would have been done. Right. And I know people use the phrase, one day at a time, a lot, and maybe even it's overused, but it's so true. Like, because all you got to do is win today and then wake up tomorrow. Or just take today as a loss and then wake up tomorrow and see what happens. Most of the time you feel better. And if you don't, you've at least had time to distance yourself from that train of thought to make better decisions. Right. And to think through things differently. And it's really important, not just for your longevity and sport, for you as a human being, right? To remember how far you've come, and also to remember what's absolutely possible. Right. And in that you can do really, really hard things, because your 50-minute run today, 4 years ago, maybe used to seem like maybe like your Wednesday run probably used to be your Sunday long run after like 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're just going to do it on a regular Wednesday. Like, that's when you just like have reached like a next level of like, in like whatever relative distance or time that is for you, you have to go back and think through that and appreciate it and go back and feel the hard times and remember what actually those felt like in an emotional and mental way. Because if you're going back now and going through those motions and feeling it out, like, you're probably somewhere better off than you were before, right? Because it's relative, right? And it's still real to you because you're still going through it, right? And then that's again the same thing with triathlon. Like, go back and instead of looking at last week, look at 5 years ago. And if you don't have records of 5 years ago, even better, because you weren't doing shit. Right. And now you've taken your life into your own hands, and you're training and you're racing and you made more friends. You're getting healthier and you got structure and accountability and you're motivated. Like, check. All these things that other people aren't doing, but you're doing it. Right. So no need to find the wrong, right, or the missed pace here, or the I didn't hit this interval, or, I was 2 seconds slower in the pool today. It's like, you made it to the pool. Like, I was honestly thinking of this a couple of days ago. When I was walking my dog, I was like, my 7-month-old English lab gets more exercise than 90% of the population in this country. Mm-hmm. Like, we walk 2 miles every morning, if not a little bit more. Sometimes a light jog, I'm like, that's 14 miles. He probably gets 60 miles of travel a month. That's, how sad that is. But at the same time, I was like, how grateful is it that that's just like a time that I've committed to carving out to, again, like, be healthier for myself, but also, make sure my dog is healthy. But it's just like, but my puppy and my dog is like healthier than most people. Like, we got to appreciate the things, and we can't get, lost in the minutia of comparison and expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think back to like when I said I couldn't swim 25 yards, and I was actually signed up for Ironman at that time. And I used to watch the mass starts at Wisconsin, like, religiously, I don't know what it was. It was fired up. So I think, it just was such a challenge that had me kind of captivated. And I think that's one of the challenges sometimes in the sport is like when you do sign it, like you said, you're nervous about that first Ironman. It's in your head all the time. And then one of the hardest things is that after you do it, you know, because that whole year working with you and training with you and all that kind of stuff from my first one, it kind of just was like we were just out getting after it all the time. And then I got to the race day and then it was over. And the next thing you know, we're leaning against the fence and that picture was taken. That's still on the pop or the main Facebook group or the first Facebook group. But after that, I kind of got into this thing about, I was so into it that I just would go over around to races and I would just videotape Ironman races and then I would post these videos and people were like, what are you doing that for? I mean, I wasn't getting paid or anything like that, but it was just sort of this passion and you know, it was kind of just working. Emily sent me this thing the other day. It says, I don't even know who this quote's from, but I liked it. It says, "Don't get me wrong. I love the science. I think researching optimal methods are great, but many of the people who I see getting caught up in what is optimal for every single variable don't even push themselves. The magic they're looking for is in the work they are avoiding." And I just was like, man, that's like right up my suboptimal bro, you know, thing is just like, you got to get out and do that work, man. And that's what I was talking about with training. You know, a lot of people will see, yeah, like stuff like, I was 2 seconds slower in the pool today, or my run was off or whatever like that. And I keep coming back with like, you know, we're training to get better. Right. And it's not, every workout isn't to go out and see what your average pace is or your average power is and things of that nature. It's about building strength and building speed. And what is it going to take to do that? And these are the things that, you know, that might make, you know, quote unquote, your workout look like it kind of was subpar. You know, if your pace was a little bit slower, but you ran the hills and you're like working on different things, those types of things are, you know, I just find so much satisfaction in that. You know, it's like I rarely, you know, like I've been doing things like warming up a little bit more, and I'll run my Garmin during the walk, you know, or run, or, you know, I'll just start it and then I'm not worried about it. You know, I'm trying to be honest with myself. Am I doing work that matters? Am I going after things when, you know, am I giving my body a chance to warm up and actually perform in such a way during the set that will help me improve, you know, things like that. So, yeah, man, it's just so interesting. I mean, like we started this whole thing and like you said, it was a little bit, you know, just by something we felt like we wanted to do, and it turned into this, and, you know, everything's not perfect. We're not perfect, but we just keep trying to figure things out. There's so many things in life that I sort of look at and just wonder why we're that way, you know? And I think when you kind of boil it back down to just feeling healthy and being happy and not obsessing about sort of the things that society has kind of pushed into our world, you know? It was even like when I was like, we've created a world, you and I, where we kind of, you know, designed our own lifestyles. And it's beautiful. But then like, oh, I'm like, man, when are we going to do these casts now? And that kind of pressure starts building up on you, and there's no reason for it, really. It's like, I think that we can create, you know, lifestyles that we want to live. And I think we should focus more on that, enjoying life. Because like, you know, as I get older, I look around, you know, people are like, why do you do Ironman? That's stupid. I would never do that or whatever. And I'm like, well, because it's hard. It gives me, it's rewarding. It feels good to be able to do that kind of stuff. You know, the people, I mean, you know, like I said, I think the other day, it was like, I don't even explain it anymore, really, because it's not worth it. It's like, you got to figure that out on your own. What's your bliss? What's going to, you know, keep you ticking along and move in the right direction? And really that's what it's all about. Find those things and, you know, don't always rush everything. You know, it's not the end of the world if you miss something. If you want to go swim a little longer and you can't get to your run or whatever, do that right now, you know?
I think there's this disproportionate percentage that like a weighted percentage that we have totally gotten out of whack, right? We're so focused on the future, the future,
Yeah.
the future. Where am I going to be in 2 years? What's your quarterly plan for the next 3 years? What are you forecasting in revenue? What are you, what goals do you want 5 years from now? I'm like, what should be driving your two things, right? And yes, having goals are great. It's a big deal, right? Things that milestones, benchmarks, whatever it is, those are important. But what usually happens is you never live in the present and you totally disregard the past. Because all you're doing is thinking about where am I going to be? And so you're never really anywhere. You're not appreciating the present. You're missing things because you're focused on your future, right? Or nothing, right? You're staring at your phone. Or you're not appreciating and being grateful of the past and maybe what it's taught you, right? Mistakes you've made, successes, all these things. All you're doing is worried about the future. And if you're doing that, you're never truly appreciating what it is you want in the present. And if you're not doing that, you can say but you have no idea what you want in the future. None. Because you're not living in the present to really know what you not just what you need or want, like all these things, because they're all kind of enmeshed in the same kind of definition of what do you need? What do you want? It's like the argument I get into for Christmas all the time. It's like, what do you want? I'm like, or what do you want for Christmas? I'm like, I don't need anything. I need nothing. Well, that's no fun. I'm like, well, so is this for me? Is this for you? Right? It's like, if you want to have fun, give me a gift card to Costco. Like, enough said. But I was like, if you're not in the if you're not really staying present, and you're not, looking back in the past and what makes you happy and what mistakes you've made, and all you're doing is looking at the future, you don't really know. You have no idea what your future, like, you want it to be anyway, because you aren't in touch enough with where you really are to know what it is you really want. You're just grasping at straws, right? It's the same exact thing as a person who signs up. Use Ironman Florida for example. You just did Ironman Florida, or you just signed up for Ironman Florida, a couple of days ago, and then it's you got a year out, and then you whip out TriCalc, and you're like, all right, I want to do a 110 swim, a 6-hour bike, and a 420 run. Why? Well, I think I can make. No, and so many people do that, right? They're planning out this future thing. They honestly have no idea what they're capable of. And that's the beauty of staying in the present and appreciating the past, is that you honestly don't know. And again, like, we're so obsessed with knowing and predictions, right? And meeting these things. Like, when we started this podcast, if we had been so obsessed with being optimal, we'd be done.
Yep.
We'd be done, right? But all we did was focus on, and it's not this like, $1 million business that you're going to see in Forbes, but we're pretty fucking happy with what we're doing, and we did it just, again, one day at a time, trying to make small, good decisions each day, and remember to enjoy ourselves and have fun. And remember why we got into it, right? For the people. And that's why, because when most of the times when you try to predict way out in the future, an athlete comes to me and they're like, hey, I think I want to qualify for Kona next year. I'm like, why? What happened? What happened in your life? that you, like, it was something happened? Because that's how triathletes work. Like, something negative or bad happens, or their friend does, and like, I want to do that. I'm like, okay, well, do you know what that requires? Well, yeah, I mean, this time, I think I probably need to get this. This very well. It's going to be 5% faster each and every year almost. But the commitment level that's required. Yeah, it's not like I'm like, okay, do you know how much volume it's going to take? Yeah, I think that's probably the problem. I was like, it's okay. It's okay not to qualify for Kona. What you can do is be happy, right? And get fit and get fast. Like, but we again, like, we love to add these things in that almost we know they're impossible, but for some reason it drives us, right? And that's the point. Like, the things that you achieve in life that are impossible, the ones that you really don't plan. You just wake up one day and look back and you think, oh my God, how did I do that? It's the runs where you run the same route every day, and then you come back one day and you go 2 minutes quicker. You're like, oh, better find the new 50-minute route, right? Or you make up a climb easier, or you get in the pool and you get done and you're like, oh my God, I just averaged, 140 for the whole swim. I've never swum that fast my entire life. it's those like little, as Bob Ross used to say, it's like those little happy accidents along the way where you kind of like, holy shit, I'm there. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm there. I never even had this as a destination, but this is pretty awesome. Like, that's how it's supposed to go. And that's how it's supposed to grow. Like, from here to there, it just happens naturally. But when you put a pin down and you mark something, or you put a date on the calendar, right? Because so many people are obsessed with these dates, and everything has to happen within a year. It can't just happen over time. It has to happen. We got 2023, coming up, and everybody's making their race plans, and you're like, you can plan to be your best at some point. It may not be next year, and that's okay, right? Because listen, if the world ends, we're all screwed anyway, and that's the only reason you're not going to be able to do this, in the next few years. So remember where you came from, remember and appreciate where you are, because honestly, that's your best guiding light, not just, tossing a glow stick down a fucking cave and expecting it to get to where you want to go. Because that's what really looking the future is for a lot of people, is like, you know what? I know where I'm getting, I know how to leave. I know where I am right now. Let me just kind of toss this glow stick into the abyss, and maybe that'll light the way to this, ending that I think I kind of want. But then again, I'm really not sure, because, I'm not in the present enough to really kind of know where I'm at anyway.
Man, yeah. I'll say, I think about the internet and how great it is and how bad it is, because not bad, I don't mean in a negative way, but how distracting it can be. I remember, I love what you said there about happy accidents, because there was a time in my life when I lived in Nashville, and it was back in the day when like Starbucks didn't have internet, and I used to go over there on a pretty regular basis, almost every night, because I was not doing much in my life, but I'd go over there and write, and I was just writing, like Bukowski type poems at the time. And I was just writing, and I was just so into it. I had no agenda whatsoever. And I think I've written that year or whatever, that 6-month span, I wrote like, over 100 of them. So I wasn't really setting out to do anything, and wasn't setting out to do a book, but I'm one of those guys that's all his life is like, I want to write a book. I want to write a book. And I want to make a documentary. I want to do all these things and shit like that. It's just like, it's kind of like the Tri-Calc thing, where you put you want to write a book, or you want to make a film because you want people to notice that you did it, rather than doing it because you like doing the work or you like the process. And I think we get tied up in that so much. And when I said about the internet, it's like, whenever I decide I'm going to write, I start writing some things, and I'm like, what's that? I'm going to look that up. And the next thing you know, you're gone. You're not even doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that's what, that's kind of how I look at training, actually, is like, I like the least distractions as possible. About as far as I go usually is music. And it just, because otherwise I'm not in the task at hand. And there's something so beautiful about, that's the thing about swimming that's so great sometimes, is that you're just in there and you got to work at it, and you can get lost in that, and it can become very enjoyable from a, just a body movement experience. And when you get your head involved in the distractions, or the phone calls, or texting while you're riding, and all that kind of stuff, that's when I have terrible work. I mean, it just sort of distracts from the real process. And I think that's such a subtle little thing, that it's almost like we talk about when you don't run with music or whatever, and you can kind of get out there and get really into the idea of running with your breath. That's really powerful. I think it really helps you enjoy it so much more, and for the right reasons, kind of thing, rather than having to, jack yourself up with like a real big dopamine boost all the time just to do something. We should really like what we do.
And I think I love what you said about the breath, and we can end it on this. I probably got to get back and take care of the household, but it's funny, because one of the things I love most about not running with music and listening to my breath is to appreciate the health that I have to run at a speed, again, relative to where you are, where you can breathe normally. Because I think we've all been places where, you're or maybe with a relative, or they're walking up and down the stairs and they're done. They're done, wheezing, breathing heavy, and you're like, oh my God, Can you imagine? Like, and again, so like when you're planning and you're mapping out 2023, like I think one of the most important things and that people should always do when they're trying to map out the next year is don't want and hope, plan. right? And planning comes from what? Experience. Look back, right? Not just at last year, but at the year before, and at the year before, and at the year before, and at the year before, right? And see how far you've come and see how long it took you to get there, right? Because triathletes we are the kings and queens of being a prisoner of the moment, right? You can skip 3 months of working out, but you get 2 stellar weeks and you're like, I'm back, baby. Here we go, right? I'm signed up for 3 Ironman. I'm going to qualify for Kona, be on the podium. Here we go. Look back, right? And one, appreciate how far you've come, but then the other part of it is appreciate and understand and be grateful for how long it took you to get there. The best things in life take time. They can't be bought. They can't be cheated. They can't be shortcut. They can't be hacked. And why would you, right? Why would you want to cut short how awesome things are? I mean, that's the process. That's like fall in love with the work. It's like, that's how it's supposed to be. But so again, like when you line up or you're mapping out your next year and you can hope and you can want and you can think and like ask yourself the harder questions. Like, do I have and does that really make me happy? Does it? I do it to myself all the time. Like if I'm, I got things rolling around in my head, I'm like, oh, maybe this, maybe this, maybe this. And I was thinking about that yesterday, or no, it's this morning because it feels like yesterday. I was getting stuff for Hayden and I was like, I'm so lucky that I can like be this flexible with my job in my life to take care of him and take care of Allie and take care of the house and the dog and like still be, functional and not have to, my biggest worry is sneaking into the office for an hour to get into podcast. It really doesn't have to be done today, but we got it done. And I was like, so just remember that, right? That, when your kid's out of school and everybody's sick, remember these days, because like we always want to plan out for the best days of our lives, right? Man, things are great. I think I can, the volume's great. I'm really crushing it at 14 hours a week. I think I can do 17. Why? You're crushing it at 14. Let's just keep crushing it, right? But we always want to plan for more than what our best currently is. And so I was thinking about that this morning. I was like, man, just remember that, when you want to do something different or expand or take on more or do this. And I was like, remember how this is like a level of happiness, right? And they remember these days, versus, the days that kind of seem super, super easy, because that's when people overplan and take on too much, right? Is when, you have too much downtime or you have too much this or you have too much that. It's like, that's when you take on too much. You have to think about the hard times, right? And, again, like being the prisoner in a moment, everyone likes to plan or take on too much when things are easy. Like we go through the same thing because there are certain times a year when it's busier for us and certain times a year when it's not. And when things slow down, we're always kind of like our minds churning, like maybe do this and maybe do that. And we're like, all right, we got to remember, we got to plan for how are we going to feel at the busiest time of the year? How stressed are we going to be at the busiest time of the year? We can't just plan for when it's easy. We got to plan for when it's hard. And that's the same thing with training, same thing with life, same thing with everything. So you got to plan for when things are going to be the hardest, right? And not just the best. And again, that goes back to, looking back at your past, looking back at how far you've come. And again, as we end it, just being grateful for where you are and the ability that you have to do these things, and be healthy. It really is. It's such an underrated, undervalued piece of what honestly it should feel like to be rich. Right, is to be healthy. It shouldn't be a monetary phrase or a word. It should be, richness in life should be health and wellness and happiness. And because, you can see people all day that are, rich, but you look at them and you're like, that's not what I want. Nor do I want to be, and then die at 60. Like, it doesn't sound like fun to me. I'd rather, sit on my front porch in a rocking chair when I'm 95 years old and not be rich, but be healthy and be around. So get out there, do your thing, look back, be grateful. We'll definitely check you in on Friday. And again, this is a little bit of shorter cast, but hey, we got it done. That's called, we say scale your training. When you don't feel well, we scale today's podcast. As always, go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you're looking for our training plan options, those are good for the remainder of the month. And again, those are also on the website as well. Training plans options, coaching options for 23. And then if you need anything from Mike, he's available, CrushingIron@gmail.com. If you need anything from me specifically, I'm at C26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. Rest up. Get it back.
I will. I'll see you Friday.
All right. See you, man.
See you.